I never expected this. It was the worst time of my life, and I had no idea it was about to get worse. It had been an agonizing week. Sarah, my wife, was in labor, and it wasn't supposed to be like this. We had spent months preparing, looking forward to the arrival of our baby boy. We'd picked out his name, arranged the nursery, and even started planning his future, all the while balancing our busy lives with hope for the new chapter ahead. But, in the most heart-wrenching way possible, everything came crashing down. Sarah went into labor early one morning, and by midday things took a turn for the worse. The doctors couldn't find a heartbeat. They said there was nothing they could do. It was a stillbirth, a phrase I never thought I would have to hear. The hospital staff was kind, but I don't remember much about the next few days. I was there with Sarah, holding her hand, trying to comfort her as much as I could, while we both dealt with a loss no parent should ever face. I took 2 days off, the minimum amount of time my company allowed under its leave policy, to be with her. We didn't ask for more. We didn't want to ask for more. Just the 2 days felt like an eternity, but I knew it was all I could afford to take given the circumstances. And then, it came. The email. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the small apartment Sarah and I had rented when I saw the notification on my phone. It was from John Hughes, my boss at the tech firm, where I'd been working for the past 6 years. I opened the email, expecting a check-in, maybe some instructions about the projects I'd missed while I was gone. What I read instead was a gut punch that knocked the wind out of me. Dear James, after reviewing your recent leave request, we've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. We understand that personal situations arise, but we must also prioritize the needs of the business. Your absence during this critical period has been deemed a violation of company policy regarding unapproved time off. We appreciate your past contributions, but this decision is final. Sincerely, John Hughes, CEO. The words blurred in front of my eyes. The email felt like it was written in some cold, bureaucratic language that barely registered as human. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I had been granted leave to attend to my wife and the loss of our child. Yet now, with a single click, it was all taken away. I sat there, frozen, with the screen still lit up in front of me. My hand hovered over the phone, not quite knowing what to do. The betrayal stung deeper than I ever thought possible. The company I had poured years of my life into, the company where I had worked long hours and sacrificed weekends, had now decided I was expendable. Just like that, I was gone. I don't think I even told Sarah right away. I couldn't. I was afraid that if I did, I'd break. I wanted to focus on her, on the pain she was going through. I didn't want her to see me unravel, not when she was already in so much pain. But I knew, deep down, this wasn't just a business issue. It was personal. The truth was, I never once thought I'd be in a situation like this. I had always taken pride in my work ethic, in being the person others could rely on when the going got tough. I was the project manager, the one who handled the pressure, who made sure deadlines were met and clients were happy. But in the end, none of that mattered. The company's policy wasn't about understanding or compassion. It was about efficiency, numbers, and profit margins. I thought back to the conversations I had had with John Hughes, my boss. How many times had we discussed the importance of family? How many times had he praised me for balancing work and home life? How had it all been for nothing? Did all those years of loyalty mean nothing when it came down to it? The email felt like an attack, a punch to the gut when I was already down. It was the kind of thing you'd read about in the news or hear in corporate horror stories. But I never thought it would happen to me. And yet, here I was, staring at the reality of my life in that moment. A man without a job, with a broken heart, and no way to fix either. For a long while, I didn't know what to do next. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the email, as the silence of our apartment engulfed me. I felt numb, like I was watching everything from a distance. My mind raced. What did this mean for Sarah? What did it mean for us? I felt as if I had lost everything. I had just lost a child I would never get to know, and now I had lost my livelihood too. I wanted to scream, to shout at the injustice of it all, but there was no one to shout at. Only a cold, faceless corporation that had made a decision without any regard for the human being behind the email. In that moment, I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this define me, not for Sarah, not for the memory of our child, and certainly not for the company that had failed me. It was time to figure out what came next. And though I didn't know it then, this moment, the moment when I was most vulnerable and defeated, would turn out to be the beginning of something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. The aftermath of the email, that cold, impersonal email, left me in a state of shock. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger to my own life. The world outside had just kept moving, oblivious to the storm that had engulfed me. The pain of losing a child, a loss that no one can truly prepare for, was already a weight I was struggling to carry. But the shock of being terminated, especially when I was only trying to be there for my wife during the most heartbreaking time of our lives, felt like an additional layer of cruelty I wasn't sure I could bear. My boss, John Hughes, had sent an email to inform me of my termination, citing that my absence had disrupted company operations, despite the fact that I had received approval for my 2 days off. It felt as though my personal life, my grief, had been treated as an inconvenience, something that didn't matter in the grand scheme of productivity. The first few hours after reading that email were a blur. Sarah was still recovering in the hospital, and my mind kept replaying everything: the birth of our son, the silence after the delivery, the heartbreak of holding him in my arms and realizing he would never take a breath. And then, the email. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had ever done for the company. I had worked tirelessly, often sacrificing time with my own family for deadlines and goals, only to be discarded at the first sign of personal hardship. I didn't know how to process it all. There wasn't a manual for this kind of grief, for losing a child and a job in the same week. But what struck me the hardest was how quickly I went from being a valued team member to an expendable resource. To be honest, I was in a daze as I packed my things. The thought of returning to the office, of walking back into that space, was almost too much to bear. But I knew I had to, because there were still things I needed to do, things I had to take care of. I needed closure, even if it was just a clean break. When I walked into the office the next morning, it was almost surreal. It felt as though I was walking through someone else's life, like I was watching myself from a distance. I wasn't prepared for what I found. There was an air of subdued shock hanging in the office. Everyone was working, but it was quieter than usual, and there were glances exchanged in the hallways. No one quite knew how to approach the situation. No one knew what to say. But as I walked through the office, heading toward my desk, I saw them. My team, my colleagues, the people I had worked with for years, gathered in the break room, standing in a tight-knit group. It was clear they had been talking about me, talking about what had happened. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect any of them to come to my defense. After all, we had all been trained to keep our heads down, to focus on the work and avoid drama. But as I entered the break room, the looks on their faces told me everything. They were angry, they were upset, and they were standing with me. "I don't even know what to say, James," Mark, one of the senior developers, said, shaking his head in disbelief. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by genuine frustration. "This is messed up. You don't deserve this. You've given everything to this place." Lisa, a colleague who had worked in project management with me for years, spoke up next. Her voice was soft but firm, the kind of calm you'd expect from someone who had seen all the highs and lows of the job. "I can't believe they did this. You took 2 days off and they fire you? That's insane." I didn't know what to say. The lump in my throat was so large, it made it hard to speak, but I nodded. What could I say to that? There was nothing I could say to make this make sense. I don't understand it either," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "It doesn't make sense. I took time off to be with my wife. It wasn't even a big deal. I was approved for it. And then they sent the email. It's like they don't care." "I'm sorry, James," Lisa said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "This is wrong. You didn't deserve this. We've all seen how hard you work, how much you give to this company. This is the worst kind of betrayal." There was a weight in the room, a collective heaviness in the air as we stood there in silence. It wasn't the silence of discomfort, though. It was a silence of solidarity. We were all in this together, sharing the same disbelief, the same anger. These weren't just coworkers. These were people I had worked alongside, trusted, and shared countless hours with. We had shared deadlines, long nights, early mornings, and celebrations of success. We had seen each other at our best and at our worst. This was real. These were people who had seen me push myself, who had seen my dedication, my commitment to the work. And now they were standing with me, offering their support in the only way they knew how. "I don't know what comes next for me," I said, the truth of it finally settling in. "But I do know that, well, I don't know what I would have done without you guys. You've always been there for me." Mark stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and empathy. "Don't worry about that now, James. We've got your back, man. You're not alone in this." I had spent years giving everything I had to the company, often neglecting my own family and personal life in the process. But in that moment, I realized something far more valuable than any project I had completed or any deadline I had met. I had the support of people who genuinely cared about me as a person, not just as a cog in the machine. And that meant everything. It wasn't the company that mattered now. It was the people who had been with me through it all. They were the ones who saw the human side of me, who didn't look at my personal tragedy as an inconvenience, but as something worth understanding. I wasn't alone in this, and that realization gave me strength. "We're not letting you go through this alone," Lisa said, giving me a soft but firm smile. "We're all in this together, and we'll help however we can." I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me. It wasn't a solution, not by any means, but it was something more valuable than any corporate compensation or severance package. I wasn't alone. These people, my team, my colleagues, were standing by me. They understood, they cared, and that made all the difference in the world. As I walked back to my desk to finish packing, I felt a sense of clarity that had been absent just moments before. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. In fact, I didn't even know where it would lead. But I knew one thing: I would find my way forward. With the support of people who truly cared, I was going to make it through this. The company might have cast me aside, but I still had something far more valuable: my integrity, my resilience, and the loyalty of those who knew me for who I truly was. That, in the end, was more than enough to rebuild everything I had lost. After the chaos of losing my job, I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency deep inside me. I had to keep moving forward. The loss of my child had left me broken in ways I could barely describe, and the termination from my job at a time when I needed support most had further shattered my belief in the company and its values. But I couldn't afford to wallow in despair, no matter how badly I wanted to. I had to rebuild for myself and for Sarah, who was also navigating a difficult recovery. She needed me strong, and I needed to find a way to get back on my feet. Luckily, things didn't take as long as I expected. As if the universe had a strange way of aligning opportunities, I received an email from Horizon Innovations, a company I had been in talks with for months. They had reached out once before with an offer for a project manager role, but I had always been too tied up with the responsibilities at my old job to seriously consider it. But now, everything had changed. The email seemed to come at just the right time, like a lifeline thrown to me at the very moment I was beginning to drown in uncertainty. The offer was enticing. Horizon Innovations was a company I had heard a lot about in the tech industry, a company that had made a name for itself with innovative software solutions, and a company culture that was known to value its employees above all else. The role was an upgrade from what I had been doing, and the salary was more than competitive. But more than that, Horizon offered something my old job never could: respect, flexibility, and a genuine interest in the well-being of their employees. In the days following the email, I had multiple conversations with people at Horizon. I spoke with the CEO, a driven and forward-thinking woman named Rachel Summers, and I met with some of the senior management team. They made it clear that they were looking for someone with my experience, someone who could step into a leadership role, take charge of important projects, and help the company grow. It was a moment of clarity for me. I realized I didn't have to just move on from my old job. I could take this as an opportunity to start fresh, to find a place where I would be valued for my experience and where my personal life wouldn't be treated as a hindrance to my professional success. I had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder and meeting deadlines at Summit Tech that I had forgotten what it meant to be a person, to have balance, to be seen as more than just an asset or a number. I needed a place where I could be myself, where my integrity mattered, and where my work could reflect my values. I didn't take long to make my decision. It wasn't just about the financial offer or the prestige of working for a high-growth tech company. It was about finding a place that felt right for me, a place where I wouldn't have to apologize for grieving, for having a life outside of work. It was about finding a culture that was human, a place where I could contribute without compromising myself. After speaking with Sarah and weighing all my options, I told Horizon I was ready to join their team. A few days later, I was in a modern, open-concept office space, signing the official offer letter. It was a strange experience, moving from one company that had used me up to another that was ready to embrace me. I could feel the change even before I walked through the doors. The office at Horizon Innovations was bright and airy, with plants hanging in every corner and employees working at desks in quiet concentration, yet with an undeniable sense of collaboration in the air. The vibe was completely different from the tense, sterile atmosphere I had left behind at Summit Tech. People smiled at one another as they passed in the hallway. There were no frantic looks, no last-minute calls to come in early or stay late to meet expectations. It was refreshing to see. That first day, I met with Rachel Summers, the CEO, in her office, a space that felt more like a cozy lounge than a traditional executive suite. She was sharp, confident, and had an energy about her that made me instantly respect her. We talked about the company's mission, its vision for the future, and the kind of leadership they were looking for. The conversation flowed naturally, with Rachel emphasizing that she wanted to build a company that valued its people, not just the bottom line. It was a refreshing change after my experience at Summit Tech, where the only value placed on employees was how much work they could produce. "You know, James," Rachel said as we wrapped up our meeting, "I know you've been through a lot recently, but you're exactly the kind of leader we need here. We believe in doing things the right way, honoring our employees, encouraging their growth, and fostering a culture that's supportive. It's been too easy for too many companies to forget the human aspect of business, and I think we can do better." I nodded, my heart lifting with every word she said. It was the kind of leadership I had been craving, a leadership that saw me as a person, not just as a resource. By the time I left the office, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since the loss of my son and the termination from my job, I felt hopeful again. This new chapter was exactly what I needed, a chance to prove myself again, but this time on my terms. Horizon Innovations wasn't just a new job for me. It was a new opportunity to find balance, to contribute meaningfully, and to be a part of something bigger than myself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I felt ready. Ready to tackle new projects, ready to work with a team that believed in me, and ready to build a future where I could be proud of not just the work I did, but the environment I helped shape. It was time to move on, to rebuild, and to start a new chapter in my career. A chapter that was going to be defined by respect, integrity, and the belief that people matter. Joining Horizon Innovations was a relief, a fresh start. The company's environment was exactly what I needed after the whirlwind of chaos that had upended my life. But even though I had a new job, I couldn't forget what had happened at Summit Tech. I had left behind a group of dedicated colleagues, people who had worked alongside me for years, people who had been affected by the same toxic leadership that had led to my own firing. It wasn't just about me anymore. If I was going to rebuild, I wanted to do it in a way that could help those who had been mistreated as I had. From the moment I stepped into Horizon, I knew it was a place that valued its people. But I also knew that many of my former colleagues at Summit Tech didn't have the same opportunities to leave, to find a company that truly appreciated them. I thought about the employees who had been with me in the trenches, people like Mark, an exceptional developer who had been overlooked for promotions, and Sarah, who had been forced to take on more responsibility without so much as a thank you. They were hardworking and loyal, but the leadership at Summit Tech had treated them like cogs in a machine, not recognizing their value beyond their productivity. They deserve better, just as I had. So I did something that felt both simple and necessary. I reached out to my former team. It was a conversation I had been thinking about for days, and finally, I sat down at my desk at Horizon to send the emails. I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't leaving them behind. I didn't want to just move forward with my career and forget the people who had been there with me, working late nights, solving tough problems, and driving success for the company. They had been my team, and now I wanted to be theirs. "Hey everyone, I just wanted to reach out to say that I'm thinking of you all," I wrote in the email. "I know things are rough right now, but I want you to know that if any of you are interested in exploring new opportunities, I'm happy to help. Horizon Innovations is always looking for talented people, and I think it's the right place for the kind of leadership and team values we've always strived for. Don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested." I wasn't promising them jobs, but I was offering a door that had been closed to many of them at Summit Tech, a chance to be part of a team that recognized their worth. I wanted them to know that they were more than just the work they produced, that they deserved to be in a place that nurtured them, where their work could have real meaning. The response from my old team was overwhelming. Over the course of the next few days, I received messages from several of my colleagues, Mark, Sarah, and even some of the senior managers who had been with me since the beginning. They were grateful for the offer, and I could sense that they were ready for a change, even if they hadn't been brave enough to take the first step on their own. But now, with my offer on the table, they saw the possibility of something better. One by one, they started to express interest. Mark, who had always been hesitant to leave, was the first to reach out. "James," he said in his email, "I've been following the company, and I have to admit, I've been really unhappy. I'm interested in talking more about Horizon." Sarah followed suit soon after. "I've heard a lot of great things about Horizon. I'm ready for something new. Can we discuss the opportunity?" I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I was no longer just a leader in a company. I was a leader in their eyes again. The connection we shared, the trust that had been built over the years, was still there. I was determined not to let them settle for a company that didn't care about them, just as I had once settled before. But I didn't stop there. At Horizon, I was given the authority to expand the team for the upcoming project I was assigned to lead. After a few conversations with Rachel Summers and the senior management team, I was able to secure interviews for several of my former colleagues who had shown interest. Horizon agreed to give them the same chance they had given me, to be evaluated based on their skills, not the broken culture of their former workplace. It was a bittersweet process, but one that felt incredibly rewarding. As I sat in meetings with HR, going over the resumes and applications from people I had once mentored, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. These weren't just colleagues, they were friends, collaborators, and partners who had contributed to the success we'd achieved together. Now, it felt like I was finally paying them back. They would get the chance to prove themselves in an environment that treated them as people, not just employees. One by one, the offers went out. Mark, Sarah, and a few others accepted the roles and began the onboarding process. As I watched them settle into their new roles at Horizon, I couldn't help but smile. They were thriving, and I could see the same spark in their eyes that I had once had when I was first given the opportunity to lead. The team I had lost at Summit Tech was coming back together. Not because of some grand master plan, but because we had all made the decision to be part of something better. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was proud of the team we were building. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving, and we were doing it together. Horizon Innovations didn't just give me a job, they gave me the opportunity to rebuild, not just my career, but my team's future, and I was determined to make the most of it. We had all faced hardships, but now we were stronger for it. And this time, we were going to build something that would last. It didn't take long for the ripple effects of my departure from Summit Tech to become apparent. While I had been focused on rebuilding my life and career, my former company was falling apart in ways that no one had expected. The cracks that had been festering for months, perhaps even years, finally began to show themselves. One by one, my former colleagues started to leave, following my lead, and Summit Tech's leadership was caught completely off guard. Within the first few weeks after I left, I heard rumblings from the industry. It wasn't long before word spread about the growing exodus of talent from Summit Tech. People were leaving in droves, not just the rank and file, but key players from the senior management team as well. Mark, Sarah, and a few others had followed me to Horizon, but I had heard from a few other trusted colleagues that the situation was worse than I had imagined. Summit Tech's leadership had completely misjudged the value of the team they had spent years building. The toxic culture, the lack of empathy, the treatment of people as expendable resources, those things finally caught up with them. The turnover rate was escalating, and the company couldn't maintain its competitive edge. More and more of my former teammates began to realize that there was no future at Summit Tech, not under the current leadership. Then came the financial fallout. Summit Tech had been struggling to retain major clients for months, and now, with key employees walking out the door, their biggest clients were starting to pull their business as well. The final blow came when the Hernandez contract, one of their most lucrative deals, was lost to a competitor. The ripple effect was felt across their Pacific Northwest division, which represented a significant portion of their revenue. It wasn't just the departure of people that hurt. It was the fact that the company had failed to create an environment where those people could thrive, where their work could have value. I found myself watching from a distance, detached but aware of how everything was unfolding. I didn't feel satisfaction or joy in Summit Tech's struggles, even though I had every reason to. Instead, I felt a deep sense of justice. The company was falling apart, but not because of the people who had left. It was because the leadership had fostered a culture of disrespect and disregard for their employees. It was a place where hard work and dedication were overlooked and personal crises were seen as inconveniences. I had been a casualty of that culture, and now I was seeing it unravel in real time. The messages kept coming. Former colleagues reached out, telling me about the chaos inside Summit Tech's offices. The HR department was scrambling, trying to figure out how to retain the remaining staff. But it was clear that the damage had been done. The morale was in freefall. They had tried to keep things together, but the truth was, people had stopped believing in the company. Once you lose faith in the leadership, it's hard to keep going. The situation reached a boiling point when Paula, the regional manager who had been a key figure in my departure, reached out to me. Her tone was urgent, almost desperate, and I could tell she was trying to maintain some semblance of control over the sinking ship. She made it clear that Summit Tech was struggling and wanted to know if I would reconsider their offer. They were prepared to match the offer I had received from Horizon, plus a bonus to compensate for the unfortunate circumstances surrounding my termination. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to keep things from falling apart completely. Summit Tech's leadership had realized too late that they had lost one of their most valuable assets in me and my team. But by then, I had already moved on. I had already built something better. I had already found a place where my work and the work of my team was valued, not just for our productivity, but for the people we were. I responded to Paula's offer with the same professionalism I had always maintained, but there was no hesitation in my voice. I thanked her for reaching out, but I made it clear that I had no intention of returning to Summit Tech. My decision had been made, and nothing about their offer could change that. It was too little, too late. The environment had soured beyond repair, and I wasn't going to waste my time trying to fix what was broken. I had already found a place where I could thrive, and I wasn't going to leave it for the empty promises of a company that had shown me nothing but disrespect. As I watched Summit Tech continue its downward spiral, I found a strange sense of peace. It wasn't because I was vindictive or because I was gleeful at their misfortune. It was because I knew that I had made the right choice. I had left a toxic environment behind, and I had found a place where I could grow, not just as a professional, but as a human being. The collapse of Summit Tech wasn't a result of my leaving, but rather a consequence of their own leadership failures. That was the real lesson here. Summit Tech had treated me as disposable, but in the end, it was their lack of empathy, their failure to build a healthy and sustainable work culture that had led to their downfall. And as much as it hurt to leave behind the company I had helped build, I knew I had made the right choice. I had moved on to something better, and that was all that mattered. 1 year after joining Horizon Innovations, I had not only rebuilt my career, but surpassed every goal I had set. My team was thriving, and we had grown by 40%. At a company event, I shared my journey, highlighting how my painful experience at Summit Tech had motivated me to create a culture where people truly mattered. As I looked out at my team, I realized that success wasn't about revenge. It was about building something better. The applause I received confirmed that we had achieved something meaningful. When Paula sent me a cactus from my old desk, I realized how far I had come. Like that plant, I had survived and grown. And now I was leading a team that flourished in a place that valued respect and empathy over profit.